So is the Tea Party the big winner in all this? Joining me now is Representative Connie Mack of Florida, who voted no tonight. Congressman, you voted no to a deal that got bipartisan support and saved America from going into catastrophic default. So I can only assume that you would have been quite happy for your country to go into catastrophic default.
Well, then you would have assumed wrong, obviously. My point is this. We now have over about $14.5 trillion of debt. And with this bill that passed today, we are assured to have over $17 trillion of debt. None of the cuts in this bill are cuts off of real numbers. They're all cuts off of increases in spending. And what I've heard over and over again from my constituents, people around the state and all over the country that have been calling my office, they're saying is enough is enough. We want a solution. We don't want a deal or a compromise. We want to solve the problem. So my vote was for solving the problem, and this bill did not do that.
The problem is any sensible economist around the world says you cannot get America out of this catastrophic debt it's now in without raising taxation. You're implacably opposed to this.
Well, saying that all economists, I don't think that's correct. I mean, there are plenty of economists who say if you were to raise taxes right now, you would kill any kind of growth that we might be having. Look, we've got a problem in this country, and that is and why is because of overregulation and too much taxation. So what we should be doing is lowering taxes and then making sure that we cut spending. I don't know who the economists are that you're talking to, but most people would agree that if you want businesses to create jobs, businesses want to create jobs because that's how they make more money. If they want to do that, you don't tax them more, you tax them less.
I'm sure you've heard of Paul Krugman, for example. He won a Nobel Prize for economics.
Well, I'm sure that there are a lot of other economists on the other side, but are you telling me that you think America, that we should raise taxes in a time when an economic turndown? I mean, I don't think that most people would think that raising taxes at a time right now. In fact, the president has said so, the vice president has said so, Democrats and Republicans have said this is not a time to raise taxes. So those economists are on the outside looking in. The rest of us are saying, how do we create jobs? And the way we create jobs is by cutting regulations and cutting taxes. And then we got to get our fiscal house in order here in Washington. With this bill that passed today, we're looking at over $20 trillion after 10 years of debt. If the federal government was an individual, that individual couldn't get a credit card because their debt-to-income ratio is so out of whack.
The real problem, though, Congressman, is that actually the reality is the American people are watching these farcical scenes in Washington, and they believe there's a complete disconnect between politicians today in America and ordinary members of the public, because what they have seen over the last 11, 12 years is a dysfunctional series of administrations taking the economy of this country into the cart.
I agree with you 100%, and that's why for up until now, all we've been doing is spending more and taxing more. That is not the way forward. The way forward is to cut spending. So right now, did you know that we spend about 7.5% more a year every year? So if you try to take that from 7.5 to, let's say, 6%, that's considered a cut in Washington. No one back home would believe that if they got an increase year after year, and if you took a little bit from that, that would be a cut. We need to get serious, and the people out in America are saying, tell us the truth, give us a solution. Let's not have some deal or bargain in Washington. Let's have a solution to the problem, which is our debt and deficit.
And finally, Congressman, presumably you believe that Speaker Boehner should now resign, given he's authorized this terrible deal.
Of course I don't believe that. I think the Speaker's done as good a job as he can, considering the circumstances. He had a president that was unwilling or unable to sit down at the table and put up his own plan. He had to work with a Senate that had no plan and no idea of its own. And then he had to work through the different factions in our own conference. I think the Speaker's done an excellent job. It's not something that I supported, but that's what happens here in Washington, D.C. all the time.
If he's done such a great job, why did you stab him in the back?
I didn't stab him in the back. Come on, don't be ridiculous with stuff like that. Now you're just making your show a joke.
Really? Why is that?
For saying things like that, Piers. Come on.
No, I actually don't agree. I think that this was such an important deal, and the American people were so desperate for a deal to be done with bipartisan support that the continual reluctance of any of the characters like you from the Tea Party side, who many people feel have had their fun. They turned this debt ceiling issue into a scandal that should never have been a scandal. They brought the country almost to its economic knees by doing so. I mean, actually now the right thing to do is to take one for the team, isn't it, and move on in a bipartisan way, not continue to try and stop this process going ahead. That's not my show being a joke, it's a fact.
Well, when you say things like stab the Speaker in the back, that demeans your own show. The real scandal here is this.
Let me explain it simply.
No, wait a second. The real scandal here is,
I don't see how you equate.
The real scandal here is that for year after year after year, we've been spending more money than we bring in. And to continue to let Washington, whether it's Republicans or Democrats, to spend more than they bring in, to rack up $14, $17, $20 trillion in debt with no way to stop the spending, that is the problem. So all these other things, they pale in comparison to what are we going to do about controlling our debt and our deficit.
But when you are a few hours away from the first ever default in American history and the disaster that would bring not just to America's economy but the world's, and your leader does a deal with the Democrats which has massive, wide, bipartisan support, and you still refuse to sign up to it, you are stabbing him in the back. Metaphorically, not really, you're not doing it with a knife, but effectively that's what you're doing.
In fact, what I'm doing is fighting for what I believe is right. And I think the American people recognize what we need to be doing is cutting spending. Now, you might not agree with that, and others might not agree with that, but that's what I believe, and that's what I think most Americans believe, that the way we move this country forward is by getting our debt and deficit under control. We can't have $20 trillion of debt. There's no way that this country can continue with that kind of debt. We need a way to cut it, and I've put forward a plan. I've done something, by the way, that the president and the Democrats didn't do in the Senate. I actually put a plan out there and presented it to the conference and to the country. So, you know, I think I'm speaking here with a little bit of authority that I'm not just saying no, I'm offering ideas as well.
Congressman Mack, thank you very much.
Thank you.